So my name is Louise Manifold, and I'm an artist, and I was born in Galway. And my work is mainly sculpture and lens-based work. Um, a lot of my stuff works out with storytelling and a lot to do with kind of notions around dystopic or heterotopic spaces. So heterotopic spaces are kind of other kind of spaces between worlds. Um, and I often kind of zone in on particular locations or narratives and create some sort of response to that. And that response may be 3D, it may be 2D. I do work a lot with video and I work also with film. My aim, a lot of like what I hope my work does a lot of ways is I do like using kind of very rich environments or create very rich environments. I often see them as a means for people to escape in some way. Um, I don't really like using my work as a way to, let's say, give a very straight answer or anything. It doesn't tell or retell things in a particular way. Often the objective is that I just want people to make kind of a wider sense of how art connects us to the world. Because one of the things I think, which is always a big issue for me, is that we spend our lives trying to distance ourselves from the world that we inhabit, even though that world, we're part of the world we're trying to understand. And I see art as a means to bridge that connection in some way. Yeah, so I went into college straight from school. So when you go in from school, then I have like a fixed notion that you want to do two-dimensional work. And I did. I think, and then I kind of got more interested. I never really been shown any kind of sculptural processes because I remember at the time it was just like over 23 years ago. So one of the big issues that I had was when you go into college, you kind of expect it to be just a bigger version of what you've already done in school, and then you get a bit of a surprise. Got quite a big surprise, but I found sculpture to be really curious. And I also found the lectures very dynamic. And I had a really amazing lecturer called Lachlan Hoare, who was an amazing, he just had a great way of joining things together. And we could talk to him about anything and he'd find some weird, I don't know, weird connection. And I found that quite interesting. So the tutors, the lecturers, they were really good. And they gave me a really strong foundation understanding, I suppose, conceptualism was because before that, that wasn't really part of my vocabulary. So, yeah. And then as I went further up, I did make a lot of sculptures, but I wanted them to kind of do something. Some of my sculptures I made were made out of very temporary material, like it was like chocolate, food. So that's the next step was if you're going to make something that's kind of fragile, in the sense not going to, it's impermanent, you're going to have to document it. So that's what I started doing, was documenting. And that led to my bigger interest in photography and a much bigger interest in video. And I suppose at the time, video as an art medium was still considered, the ambitiousness of an installation was still quite small, quite basic compared to what we have now. But when I first used a video projector, I thought it was this fantastic thing. It like illuminated up space. You had this a relatively curious piece of video, and then like it was on a curtain, and the curtain was moving in the dark, and looked like a ghost. So I just really fell in love with that. And then when I finished college, I decided to go to Central St. Mary's. I wanted to get out of home and go to London. And that was really good for me. It also started my interest really in celluloid film as well. I was very lucky and I had a really nice, very good friend of mine now, Jennifer Jacobs, and she introduced me a lot more to film as a medium. So I was doing a lot of shooting with Super 8, and then I progressed from Super 8 into 16 millimeters. So it was a little bit trickier, but it's really amazing to actually see a real film and see all these little prints on it. And also, I suppose, back into the idea of printing, so I was really fascinated with what you could do to the film, to the print of the film. So you get your neg and you get your print. And then I was like, what happens if I start puncturing a hole in it? What happens if I put it through a sewing machine? What if it happens if I put it through a bath of bleach and some fades out? And that's what I kind of started using the steam deck for as well, because that was quite fun because you could do a lot of trial and error. Naturally, it destroyed. The steam deck still works, but yeah, it's had a tough life. When it came into my possession, its life got terribly hard. I liked playing with things. Like I suppose I come like I come from a family where we collect a lot, manipulate things a lot. My mother is an artist. I was always a very messy kind of child. I would manipulate and mess things. One of my jobs in school was to mind the candle. No one gave me that job to mind the candle would light up. And I just kept poking at it because it was way more fun when all the wax dripped. So I think part of being an artist is you have to be a messer. Wax is a disgusting medium though, isn't it? It's so strange because it looks kind of dead and when it's made into a candle, obviously it illuminates. Candy burns down with a unit of time. People, people do magic spells with wax. It's a very otherworldly thing. But obviously, grey wax is a bit grosser than that. So it is. That was for not the honest Ulsterman, for abridged. So particularly like Greg, who owns abridged, Greg McCarthy, is a very gothic sensibility. So you always, when you work with Greg, it's free reign to be a goth and look at all these things. But I actually did that shoot in here. So I've had this studio for quite a while. I've had this studio since 2012. And I remember it was still kind of, I think it was 2003 or 2002. I'm not 100% sure. But I know things weren't fully back to normal, COVID wise. And I love working with modelling wax as well. I don't know if you've ever been to. There is a museum in Florence, and they have the most amazing wax models there. It's called a Specula. They also have a huge amount of taxidermied animals. One of my big things is I love museums, and I love going to places and trying to get to shoot at their storage collection. Because what's in storage is always either there's something wrong with it, or maybe there's problems somewhere along the lines, or they can't show it for whatever reasons. It doesn't fit into whatever story you're trying to do. So that makes it interesting for me. Now, besides that, they have this huge wax anatomical collection. And they're amazing. Like, they're absolutely stunning. So I remember thinking about them before I started that project. And there was also these tableaus, and they were made by a guy called Sunbio. They're called Sunbio waxes. And they're all kind of depicting like death and pestilence. So I kind of thought a bit more about that when I started doing those photographs. And obviously there's a lot of wax modeling in that. I also remember it was kind of hot because it was the summertime, because all my wax started to disintegrate a little bit. And I didn't want to be a filmmaker. Before that, I wanted to be a nun, which is not very Christian to do. But I wanted to be lots of things because when you're small, I don't know, I was quite throwaway with it. But I loved hoarding things. That was a big thing for me, was hoarding stuff and covering them with things. I still kind of do that in my work. Because found objects are quite, to me, found objects a really interesting thing. It's like something that needs to be charged, and you can charge it by imbuing something with it that somehow makes it. You see how old it is, how it's failed. You can make all these weird connections with it. You can make very otherworldly. That's something I've always tried. I think even when I was a kid, I did that, but it was on a more basic scale. So I remember once I found this box and I started to cover it in tinfoil. And then I got all these teacups, they were them in tinfoil. And then I just put them in my bedroom, the whole thing. Most of it I shook myself. And then I called it a name, some ridiculous name, and then I walked off. That was that. But I didn't that's creepy. Those kind of things. I think whatever I would have done would have been creative. I don't think I would have had the wherewithal to be a film director because I'm extremely indecisive. I also wanted to be a journalist for a while. And kind of, I really wanted to, I don't know, do some sort of document any kind of, kind of sites, crises and things like that. I remember that. I was really useless at that. I imagine. I don't know about being a nun, I couldn't have been good at that. So all of the things really kind of fell away a bit, but I do know that one thing that we all kind of did in school, like my mother, we all made us do art, like we would do art for a leaving cert, and then for putting portfolios together, it was just kind of something my sister did it, I did it. I don't think my younger sister did it because she went into science, but she was not interested in science. But it's just kind of progression. I know this sounds really bad, but I didn't really think an awful lot about the future when I was young. I think it's quite amazing actually how much kids are concerned about the future, think about the future. I thought about nothing. I'm sure I did think about stuff, but I didn't think about the future at all, which is kind of strange. It was kind of nice, actually. It was sort of fun. It was very ambitious. Obviously, COVID was pretty much the kiss of death for it, but we still got it through. It still ran. We were kind of lucky because a lot of what I planned to do, so I was working with the Marine Institute and bringing artists out on their research vessel. And they were very supportive of it. The scientists were very supportive, but we had everything done retrospectively in order for the work to be made. So when lockdown actually happened, people were in an okay position. They had everybody had done that part. However, trying to create an event and all of that was another big pain. But it was quite an ambitious project. I like this probably another aspect to how I work. I do a lot of I'm really interested in the idea of events and bringing people together in different ways, and I think that's kind of important. Um, I suppose part of that's trying to be a curatorial almost strand. I don't see myself as a curator though. I do see myself as someone who just maybe asks really good people to do really weird stuff and hope for the best. So, doing working with the MI and Go 2020, there was quite a lot, like there was a lot of ambition put forward for that. And we did kind of everything worked out in some respects, but it was a big challenge to do it during COVID. Oh, I do, and I think if you're going to work third level ed parts, that's working with people too. And you do get a lot of energy from it. And I do think there is a place for art to allow people to work together in different ways. Like I suppose a good example is when so we did a shoot with the author Kevin Barry. He created a sound piece, a story in the lighthouse on Inisheer. And we showed that, so we actually did have an exhibition out there and we actually did make our correct deck, which is kind of proud of considering the kind of chaos we were around. Granted, it was not the busiest event because of things, but one thing we did have, we got Irish Lights on our side to give us the use of the lighthouse. So we shot the lighthouse. We then presented Kevin's work in the lighthouse, and it was a half an hour long, so it was kind of slots. So what we really wanted, was a custodian for the lighthouse, I suppose. And we had a lot of volunteers, and the volunteers were brilliant, but given the nature of it being the lighthouse, we wanted one very particular volunteer, or custodian, and that was the lighthouse keeper. So we did a lot of asking, promoting, and he agreed. And it was brilliant because he also gave everyone a tour. Plus, he put the lighthouse light on as well during the day, which I thought was good. But that's when it's really cool when you get to work with people because you see all their knowledge and their understanding, whether it's of a place, of practice, and that when you can create points of connection with that can be shared, that's really exciting. And I think he had good practice. I developed had some significant points personally in my life, and also in ways in which I try to make sense of things. So I suppose one of the things I've always been interested in is how technology becomes redundant, and that's happening way, 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 way faster than it ever has been. And one of the things that's still kind of what I see as pushing through all of this is radio. So radio, obviously, a lot of it's digital now, but it can still be received through different devices. One of the things I think is very interesting is when we hear like kind of a disembodied voice through a machine. So that's when I became interested in sound. So I always had kind of spoken word and narrative in a lot of my works going back to about 2008, I think. It was just finding kind of a way through that. So particularly for sound in that respect, for that project area sparks, because there was kind of specific around that all the works had to be sound based so that they could be broadcast. I was really interested in the notion of broadcasting and what that did and how people received it and material, and also the idea of belief and communication device. It's quite interesting on a ship as well, even though they have a lot of digital satellite stuff, they have all analog stuff as well, because they might meet on a ship that doesn't have digital stuff. So it's kind of cool. They still have a fax machine that just speeds out loads of stuff. I've got loads of rolls of it there just to draw on it. But I think for the artists involved, they were very excited to go on the ship, on the survey. I think they kind of surprised at the asks around it, so it became quite visual as well because some of the artists were composers or authors, so it was easier. But once it became something that was existing on the island, then we said we have to find ways this can be encountered. And then we did broadcast through Lyric and Blue of the Night as well, which is good fun. I think is a really interesting point with AI. A lot of people are using AI as therapy. That's an interesting space. It's a kind of a frightening space, and it's actually kind of good. So we've been doing a lot of kind of research around it. There's lots of great things, like I think if you're mindful that a lot of what's generated through AI still has a lot of problems in terms of engaging, but there's other parts of it that are, quite seamless. Um, that's one place, point of not maybe it's just a point of focus for me right now. The other things obviously can make mincemeat out of language sometimes. You can get it to do funny things. So there's a lot of the kind of suppose it's our job as creators to kind of poke at this thing, like it's our job to poke at everything, and test its failings. Um, my worry with a lot of it, obviously, also is the amount of energy in data centers. Like that's kind of crazy. But anything in terms of art I've seen generated, yeah, not terribly interested. Like for me as an artist, the process is always the most exciting bit. The worst bit is the exhibition. That's when you're like pulling your hair out or standing around not knowing what to do with yourself. So art, I don't think artists want to make AI generated work because that would be kind of boring. Um, but I do know maybe other people might find it fun. Yeah, sometimes I need to tone it down, but I find it kind of fun. And I know people get it's funny because sometimes people, particularly sometimes in Ireland, they're like, you work with a lot of mediums, why are you doing that? Then you go to Europe and nobody's problem, which I think is kind of funny. But yeah, those are really uncomfortable. Because it's what, so there's one piece that actually goes into your mouth, and then there's four hooks. It's really quite heavy, you drool a lot. Thankfully, I shot that in the studio in 80. I should probably say that off. But it was quite weighty. But I enjoyed it because it was very much about the idea of the inability to speak, but it also talks. I love the beauty of the laugh. So it is. So it's actually mouth extenders are designed for whitening people's teeth. They're quite pretty. It took a lot of work, so I had to model my mouth. I had to do lots of casts in my mouth, and then it was a lot of pulling your mouth to fit it. But I remember actually doing that when I was in. We were just finishing off the college year, and I just squashed it into my mouth. But I didn't really. Well, I did know that there was other members of staff there. But I've collaborated a lot with a really amazing glass artist called Andrea Spencer. And she makes really beautiful, beautiful pieces that are incredibly delicate. There's something about how she works. She has a great knowledge of the material and she's extremely poetic with it. And then you go and you ask her, would she work on your design for something that's profoundly ugly? And something interesting comes out. I think she's quite baffled with some stuff that came up. She always imbues it with that knowledge of the material and beauty. So even though it's a bit ugly, it's still very beautiful. I think. I think it's really important. It's really important because at one point you were a student, and I don't want to sound like art saved me or anything, but it learning to think in a certain way and to feel very excited and love something, um, and want to make more. That's kind of something that I got from my lectures. So if I could ever do that to somebody else or help that, and say, I think that's really important because if it did change, because I wasn't terribly interested in anything. Um, and that, I would say, for me, was a significant shift, not only in my thinking, but my determination. I don't think I was particularly determined before that. I was quite young, but I think learning about art, learning about having practice, learning about how other people made things, um, and developing a love and a passion for that is really important. Because if you have a passion for something in your life, whatever it is, that will sustain you, you know. And I do feel that if I can in any way impart that to students, then that's good because you need more artists. Well, what you can do is you can see some of these guys here. They're just on the table. I'm going to get them French color glasses. Let me figure. I often like so I've got a heap of prints that I'm working on. They're actually from Mojave last year. And I'm also working on a video piece. Biggest part of my video piece is it's giant. I don't mean it's giant. I mean it's giant because it's combining 3D models and 2D media. I'm working it in Blender, but I'm thinking of moving it over to another piece of software called Nuke, just because it's better compositing abilities there. Um, and also, it's just at the moment I don't have a proper desktop. I just have a laptop, and it's doing okay. But I think it's just you can see it's just struggling to try and make the changes. So start consolidating the stuff down a bit. My design originally was that I was going to make it for a VR headset, but I'm not entirely sure. I have the design there and I have the headset to work with, but I just find it very something very there's something more interesting about looking at people with VR headsets on than actually experiencing VR. That's what I think. I'd like to redesign a headset though. I don't know if you know Kerry Connolly's work. Yeah, they make those really cool big metal space. They looked kind of cool. They look dangerous, so I don't know, maybe something like that. So that's kind of this summer. That's what I'm working on. I'm doing a lot of writing. I have a lot of texts that I have to work on for different projects, so that's the other thing. And then hopefully, yeah, I'll be doing some collaborative work. I try and get a good chunk of stuff done in the summer. You have to manage your time a bit differently. But what I try to do is if you can get everything into a kind of a good space in summer, then you can keep working on it then over the winter. Oh, God, it was so long ago. When I came back from London, and I was I wasn't very sure should I come back from London. But I was broke, and it wasn't, even though you're young, you're kind of like, well, I can go back. Maybe I won't. Or I don't know. What you're trying to do is set up a space for yourself. So the first thing I really need to was a studio space. And got to art space. And a studio space was shared first. It was in Lisbon. And then I moved down to Black Box. And I'm really happy here because it's just that bit closer to town. It's really quiet. It's good security and it's cozy and warm. It's a big thing because of the winter it can get really chilly. So yeah, I would definitely say art space was significantly one of the big reasons I stayed in Galway because studios are very hard to get. Studios that are subsidised with decent, reasonably decent space and a good location are exceptionally hard to get as well. So I feel like I'm very lucky to have that. It's the single, for me, having space to make work is vital. Okay, the I like the only like I do like you can do stuff at home, but I do think you need something that's kind of separate. Absolutely, we like it's incredibly social. Here's a little bit quieter. When I was up in Lisbon, it's very social. You'd always be people eating and chatting and this and that and the other. And it was also fun. I really, when I first started in art space, I really enjoyed the community there. Because it also gave you a kind of social outlet that connected you back into what was going on in Galway, which was really helpful. because in some ways I, was away for a while, so I didn't know things that well. I didn't know things that well previous to that. So not only did it allow me to have a studio space, but it also allowed me to be in a community where somebody said, look, there's an opening happening, this is happening, I'm doing this, do you want to be part of it? All of those things. So definitely when you're starting off, that's huge.
Oh.
I'd love to see, I think what would be amazing for our space is obviously I think keeping studios, expanding the studios, seeing possibilities of the studios existing in maybe a bigger unit, maybe we all stay together. Workspace is always really important. Production space. One of the things that's quite hard in Go is it's very little to stress test for, and that would be a huge asset. There is always space for different resources. For me, the biggest resource is having space. And I think if we can capitalize on that and find different sites, different venues, things like that, maybe that would work. Everything feels a bit kind of negative, bit grim at the moment. I think it is important to note that it being around for 40 years says a lot, and it also says a lot about the how embedded it is in Galway with respect to that there is continued support there. Lots of things over that 40 years had the same intention and maybe couldn't stand as long as this. So I think what will be good is to acknowledge that and build upon it. I definitely think it's key to keeping artists in Galway. And I think keeping artists across the board, I'm not just talking about visual artists, is key to keeping a city alive, you know. So hopefully, bigger space, We cover this is her outside layer. This is her Michelin man. I'm only calling her female because she's got lots of arms and legs. And she's sitting like that. She needs a bit more effort in here. But I'm going to cover this again, I think. Might make for a good 3D scan. So I could do that. Material. It's like a kind of, it's actually, you can knit with this. I got it. But I want to have a piece. Actually, it's just beside you there, Hugh. You just turn around this box. You can see some latex in it. Just sheet of latex. Just directly underneath that box. See kind of sheet of latex just above your finger. Yeah. So actually, one of the good things about Berlin is there's a really cool place called Modular, and they have. So I'm not really sure.
Again, I meant to ask you about the thing I forgot the residency you did with in Berlin. I forgot about that.
Oh yeah, that was a good while ago. That was 2017. This is kind of tough. But Modular is amazing. It's worth going to. Like completely. Modular is 4 floors of art and loads of materials. Oh my god! So often I just buy samples. See, like this.
Yeah.
I buy a sample, and then I can order stuff online from them. Because if you're getting the Ryanair flight with the one suitcase in front, you're limited. Which have been very cool. I'm going to have a bit of a squeeze. He'll all be squeezed together a bit more. I'm not sure what's happening to him. But I like how puffy this bit is. This is actually one thing and it's all sewn together.